The Raptors overcome an ugly and tired first half for a grinded out victory. Let's talk about it.
This is the Raptors Postcast, your instant game reaction for the Toronto Raptors. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to this episode of the Raptors Postcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 podcast network covering your team every day. And we're coming to you live after the Raptors 122-109 win against the Sacramento Kings on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the Locked On Podcast feed. I'm Zulfi, Sheikh, credentialed journalist covering the Raptors and the NBA for over 2 years now with outlets like Sportsnet and Raptors Republic. And now I'm one of your humble hosts on the Raptors Postcast, breaking down each and every game with you. And with me is Duane Notice, a.k.a. Dino, our professional basketball player and analyst. Duane has represented Canada. He's been part of the Raptor system with the 905, and he's still hooping professionally in leagues like the CEBL. And tonight, on tonight's show, we're going to talk about how the Raptors were able to flip the script in the second half, break down a big third quarter push to turn the tides. We'll get some thoughts from our resident pro with a segment we like to call Take Notice. And then we'll wrap things up by handing out our player of the game. And Duane, I'm going to throw it to you here. This was very clearly a classic tale of two halves for the Raptors. It was a little ugly first. The first quarter wasn't too bad, but the second quarter, they summarily got outplayed. And this is against a Kings team that, yes, the Raptors were on the second end of a back-to-back, but so were the Kings. And the Kings just point blank have not had a great season. They've won 12 games. They're bottom 3 offense, bottom 3 defense. And the Raptors trailed to that team 61-52 at halftime. But clearly, by the final score, they were able to figure out coming out at the third quarter, make some adjustments. What do you think was the biggest shift for the Raptors in that second half for them to adjust and come out with the win?
I think for them just being composed, right? They had to figure out a way to be resilient. In that second half, they paid more attention to just bearing down on the mistakes that they made in the first half. And I think it was a tale of two halves, like you said. We were used to seeing the Raptors kind of have a poor third quarter, but instead they had a poor second quarter. And in the second half, they did a good job of making closing the gaps on those mistakes. But I like the fact that they moved the ball like we talked about yesterday. They made shots, but they also got out in transition. We know the fast break points were there again today. I think they had 22. And just seeing the secondary stars step up, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. But I think they did a great job of just having poise and relying on their steady, guys that always get them through in these tough moments, whether it's Scotty or whether it's BI, who held the fort down in the fourth quarter, especially.
Yeah, I think you said it in the last couple of shows we've done. It's about like trusting the process, the work ethic, and playing to your strengths. And you mentioned it. They finished with 22 fast break points, but that first half, you didn't really see a lot of trust in what their strengths were. This is a very old Kings team. It's the second oldest team in the league, and the Raptors had 10 fast break points. They weren't pushing the pace like you saw against the Warriors one night before. They weren't trying to hit a tilted defense. Again, this isn't a great Kings defense by any means. You have a rookie center in Maxime Reynaud out there, and then you have a Precious Achiuwa, which we know he's played for the Raptors, so they know he's been kind of a journeyman in the NBA. When these guys are impacting the game in the first half like they were, clearly something wasn't clicking for the Raptors. Some of it was just missing bunnies as well. There might be some tired legs. They got some good looks. There was a lot of back cuts you saw, especially from a guy like Grady Dick. They weren't necessarily finishing, but being able to grind it out, find ways to win ugly is what younger teams need to do, like the Raptors. So I always like turning it to you for a player's perspective on this, Duane. Like, what is the value in finding a way to win a game like this? It's not pretty. The Raptors didn't end up having a pretty shooting game or anything like that. This isn't going to be something where they're going to look at the film and say we were perfect, but they still found a way to get the job done.
And that's what it's all about. You want to walk away with a victory. So if you win ugly, a win is all that matters. At the end of the day, when you go home and you lose, you're going to talk about it more. But when you win, as long as you win, you're going to be having that good spirits and you're going to be able to continue on. But for them, I think they did a great job. Like I said, I noticed in the first quarter, what I really appreciated was they established some defensive pressure. You saw the pickup points were really high, and they picked Westbrook's pocket in the first quarter a couple times. That was Shed, or whether it was Scotty Barnes, who was setting the pace with that. So that is a great way to be disruptive to the Kings offense, and we saw that they got disoriented going into the second half, and I thought they get back to that in the second half where they play with a little bit more pressure and they trusted themselves more. You mentioned trust already, but coming on a second night of a back-to-back, you need other guys to step up, and Shed did that today, and I appreciated that from him because he was just consistent. In the first half, shots weren't falling. You made a great point, Z, where sometimes you execute and the ball just won't fall. Grady Dick, 1 for 6 from the three-point line, but I like the shots that he took. In the second half, he was still able to be active, get out in transition, make some plays, and then Shed. I know he's a 32% 3-point shooter for the season, but if guards are going to continue to not disrespect his shot and go under on the ball screen, he's going to have to continue to have the courage and the confidence to make that shot and take it, because you got to keep the defense honest. And by doing that, I think it helped open up the doors for guys like BI and also Scotty to take us home at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I'm glad you got to the fourth quarter because, again, it wouldn't be a Raptors game if there wasn't a bit of late drama in it. It happened against the Warriors in this game as well against the Kings. They did make a late push. I believe it was like a 12-2 run at one point where the Raptors were able to go up to a 19-point lead throughout the third and fourth quarter, but that was down to like single digits by that point. But I think you mentioned a little bit where some of the leaders were able to step up. Scotty Barnes made some plays late. Brandon Ingram, I think his shot making, especially in the fourth quarter, was very pivotal and timely. What did you see from these guys closing out the game and being able to manage some clutch offense for a team in the Raptors where their defense has been pretty solid in the clutch? It's been one of the better defenses, but the offense hasn't necessarily been there in these clutch situations most night, but they deliver tonight.
Yeah, and you talked about Ingram and Barnes, and they both went 12 for 12 from the line. So that's a great start when you talk about your stars attacking the basket, putting pressure on the paint. And for a little bit, the Kings were the ones that were applying that pressure, and they kind of were outdoing the Raptors when it comes to attacking the paint and getting those paint touches. But in the second half, I felt the Raptors did a great job of penetrating, getting the ball to the middle of the zone where Scotty was able to operate and do damage, whether it was via the pass on the short roll over the top. We saw the late lob to Abaji at the end, or whether it's Scotty attacking DeMar DeRozan just off the dribble, couple dribbles to the basket, layup, and nobody could stop that. So Brandon Ingram, we call him the steady stabilizer, the bailout king. B-High is one of those guys that can make clutch decisions and shots, because again, the reason why Abaji got that lob was because Brandon Ingram was able to demand so much attention because of his offensive power that he had the double team off the pick and roll, hit Scotty out the short roll over the top, and he was able to throw that lob because he forced that Kings defender to make a decision. Am I going to stop Scotty Barnes going to the basket, who's having a great game with 23, 7, and 8, or am I going to try and, take away the lob? And he chose the latter, took a charge, and Scotty made a great decision by throwing the ball over the top. So when you have players who are capable skill-wise, but then also capable IQ-wise, I think you're going to be in good hands. And that's the luxury of the Raptors and also Darko and the stars of Brandon Ingram and Scotty Barnes.
Yeah, I think that was a really good point that you made about Brandon Ingram, specifically about being able to make those decisions in that situation, not just to be a one-note type of player. I think some of the knock that some people have had on Brandon Ingram this season is like, we know he's a willing and capable shot taker, especially in those tough situations. Again, he made timely shots tonight. I think it was right after that run by the Kings. It was Ingram who came off a pair of screens and curled to the free throw line and hit a jumper, which you want. But when he's able to make reads in to a short roll player like Scotty Barnes, I think that's super important. For him to have 4 assists tonight on no turnovers, that's not something we've gotten from Brandon Ingram every single night. We haven't seen him necessarily always be comfortable making the read out of a double every single night. So for him to have that was progression for him late as well. And it's part of the reason why the Raptors were able to make a double-digit comeback for the 10th time this season. It's part of the reason why they're able to find themselves composed late. And that's what you want from your leaders. It's something that feels like, I think you mentioned this when we talked about the game against the Warriors. Sometimes there's some milestones or checkpoints you really do want to hit along the way. And for Brandon Ingram, that felt like very much one of those checkpoints that you wanted to see from him.
Yeah, exactly. And I love the fact that I think in the first quarter, especially, he was the catalyst for some of the shots that Mama was getting, right? Because when Brandon Ingram was posting up on that right block and he kind of had that ISO, yes, he can go to work. Yes, he could turn over Monk and just face up and shoot it. But instead, he was drawing that secondary help. And you have a guy who's trying to dig down from the nail. And he made 2 beautiful passes out of the post to Mamu, who knocked it down. And we haven't even talked about him yet. But man, he's been playing at a high level.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Brandon Ingram post passing, because when you said that, I knew exactly one of the passes you were talking about. It was from like the left elbow. It was like a skip pass with one hand, just zipped it right to Mamu in the corner, and he splashed it. When you have BI having the confidence to make those kinds of reads and those kind of passes, it adds such a strong layer or element to his game that makes him just that much more of an all-star caliber player. And I think it makes all the difference for the Raptors. But Duane, I think it's time we get to our turning point of the game, because this was a very fun third quarter I want to talk to you about.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
All right, we already mentioned it. It was a bit of a tale of two halves, but I think the Raptors really did come out of halftime with a strong talking to from Darko Rajakovic, I imagine, about making some adjustments and being able to punch. Raptors gave up 30 points in the first quarter, 31 in the second quarter, again, to a Kings team that is a bottom 5 offense, and the Raptors responded to that by holding the Kings to 21 points in the third. They outscored them 43-21. They held the Kings to 38% shooting in the third quarter. The Raptors shot 74% from the field in the quarter for 6 turnovers. They got to the line 12 times in that quarter as well, which I think, again, goes back to just making your lives easier. And they got a lot of contributions. Again, what do you think, just that third quarter specifically, and being able to come out of halftime with a bit of a break, with a bit of a reset? What did you see from the Raptors being able to do that?
I saw them sticking to the grind. Like you said, it was an ugly win, but grinding it out, and that's what they did, committed to it. They knew it was going to be an ugly game, the way the Kings were playing, mucking it up, and they just adapted to that. I think in the second quarter, they were shying away from the style of basketball that was presenting itself, and in the third quarter, they just embraced it, and they're able to overcome because of it. But I like the fact that they were moving the ball, and on that run, we saw a guy like Shed who had 10 points in that third quarter, so he's providing a great spark. We talk about that back kind of court bully between Shed and then also you have IQ doing his job as well, putting in 18 points. But some of that came from the third quarter, and both of them having that balance of that point guard PG front, I think has been a great thing that we talked about in the last show that we're seeing come to fruition as well again today in today's game. But I just love the fact that in the third quarter they had no quit in them. And that's a great thing to see, because when you keep a team within striking distance and you're able to kind of threaten that lead, and you know that no lead is safe, I think going into the fourth quarter provides an extra amount of kind of confidence. And again, knowing that the Kings are not the best team in the world, especially in that conference, you kind of still have that extra courage under your belt, knowing that if we keep the game close, we could kind of blow it open. I think in the fourth quarter, that's when they smelled blood and started doing what they had to do to get the job done.
Yeah, I think that was a really good phrase used, that they smelt blood in the fourth quarter. But for you to get to that point, you need to build up your confidence, like you said, Duane. And they really did that throughout the third quarter. And something else they did in the third quarter, which we haven't really touched on much yet, is I felt like they really did start to solve the zone, at least the Kings version of zone defense. Obviously, every team's going to be a little different. And the Sacramento Kings weren't shy about implementing zone. I believe it was 2 minutes into the game, they went into a zone and they basically stuck to it for as long as possible. And the Raptors, again, coming out of halftime, having a conversation, resetting, they started, to me, it looked like they were finding a variety of ways to kind of break that zone, whether it was getting to the middle. The very first play after halftime, it was like a double screen set for Quickly where he split it, got middle, was able to get a floater to fall in. A couple plays later, Jamal Shed from the left wing, he attacks a closeout. He doesn't finish, but he gets free throws out of it. And again, 12 free throws in the quarter for the Raptors. Easy buckets. It's ways to make the zone less effective. And then not long after, Scotty Barnes was able to flash middle, hit a jumper as well, and attack that zone. What did you see from the Raptors specifically in terms of being able to break down that zone in the second half? Even like, obviously part of it is the shots falling. They're able to make a couple more threes, but I think there was more to it than just hitting shots necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, as a player, when you see the similar type of defense every single night, if you're prepared for it, you watch game film, you heard what Scotty said in the post-game conference with Kayla Gray. He was speaking about them seeing the zone look and preparing for it because they know teams are going to implement it, knowing that they're struggling from the three-point line. So I'm sure that they have different options in place prepared. You mentioned a couple of them, the high ball screen where Quickly split it. And when it comes to a zone, the NBA, the toughest part about implementing that on the defensive end is that you're giving up so much space for the offense because there's 3 seconds in the key. So if they find a way to get into the middle, which they did when you had Scotty flash to the middle, it presented so many problems for the Kings. And then, like you said, just having the confidence to make shots, but then putting the Kings into closeout situations, attacking the basket and not settling. That's one of the imperative things when you're playing against the zone, is not to settle, because that's what they want you to do. They want you to take quick shots in the shot clock. They want you to think that this shot is really open, but that's what they're baiting you to do. So the Raptors did a great job of kind of working the shot clock, getting the ball into the middle of the paint and flipping the script in terms of them being the ones that were the aggressor and attacking and penetrating in the interior of the defense.
Yeah, and you mentioned it before. Sometimes it's trusting the scouting report. It's trusting the process coming into it as well. Again, this is a Kings team that I believe is bottom 5 in terms of paint scoring for opponents. They're even worse at the rim. So if you start settling against that team, kind of like the Raptors did in the first half, it's not a recipe that you're playing to your strengths. So like you said, I think that was a really good point. Being able to find ways into the paint against a team that's not necessarily great at it it's stacking little wins to get you that big win in the end, which the Raptors were able to do and flip that script in the second half. And I think that's what you want to see more of from them. And like, just again, finding ways to beat the zone, I think is going to be so important for this team, because it's starting to get to a point where just teams are going to it more often, sooner rather than later. And the Raptors are going to have to get more creative with beating it. And because it's not just going to be shot making every night. Like tonight was, I mentioned it after the Warriors game, they're not going to hit 21 threes every night, but they also shouldn't be hitting like 7 threes every night. There needs to be a middle ground. The Raptors found that, so they weren't so reliant on 3-point shooting being their way of beating the zone, but it was still part of the recipe. And I think that's exactly what you want to see.
Yeah, that's exactly what you want to see. You don't want to be a one-trick pony, right? So you don't want to be a three-point shooting team, but you don't want to be a paint dominant team. You want to find a balance, especially in today's game of basketball, where every position kind of invites so much variety in terms of position and skill. But the Raptors did a great job of doing that. And then another reason why I think that teams really struggle when they play the zone, especially when you play against the Raptors. I think what they need to focus on is rebounding. We saw a guy like Mog get 9 rebounds today. So
Right.
when you're playing against a zone, you're susceptible to giving up offensive rebounds because you're guarding an area, not guarding a man. So the Raptors need to look to crash the boards if they're going to be taking these shots against these zones, and if they're going to struggle to shoot against these zones when it comes to the efficiency, or they got to continue to mix it up, screen the offset guy. And that's the beautiful thing about screening a zone is, because you're always going to have an advantage, because you're going to have more numbers up top towards the bottom, depending on the type of zone that they're being played. But I think the Raptors did a great job of picking apart that zone. And I think it's going to show other teams that, okay, you could try to play the zone if you want to, but there are some viable solutions that the Raptors could implement to kind of get over that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a very good point from you, Duane. It shows other teams, right? Because there's a reason why the Kings went into that zone so quick. They saw what other teams were able to accomplish with it outside of a hot shooting night against the Kings. So now when you put tape the other way, where you see the Raptors are able to fight against that zone, it's going to make teams think twice about it. And it's going to be opportunities for the Raptors to not have to play against it as much. And we know this team can obviously do stuff better against a man defense. But all right, Duane. We are going to come back after a quick short break. And when we do, we're going to dive into the secondary stars of this game that you want to point out. And then we're also going to hand out our player of the game as we continue the Raptors postcast after this. All right, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Fridays always feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. It's Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern, and it's become appointment viewing in the NBA with NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during happy hour always brings something new, whether that's boosts, bonuses, and surprises. The timing is always perfect. It's right before games, right before the weekend start. Hopefully you took the Raptors overs on threes tonight. Again, 13 for 33. That's nearly 40%. It was a good shooting night for the Raptors, even though it started a little ugly. And NBA Happy Hour always adds that extra energy to Friday night basketball without overthinking it. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour, only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Now, today's episode is also brought to you by Quo. New Year's, new systems. This is when a lot of us look at the messier parts of our businesses and think there has to be a better way to run things. And there is. Streamlining your communications is one of the easiest upgrades you can make. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo. That's spelled QUO, the smarter way to run business communications. Because when your team is reachable, organized, and communicating in one place, you're not just working cleaner, you're creating more opportunities to connect with customers. I love how simple Quo makes everything. Your whole team can call and text from one shared business number, so nothing gets missed. It works right from your phone or computer, and you can even keep your existing number. And Quo Smart AI tools automatically log calls, they summarize conversations, and highlight next steps so details never slip through the crack, which is why it's no surprise Quo is the #1 rated business phone system at G2, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses, from solo operators to growing teams. So make this the year where no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo for free, plus get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/LockedOnNBA. That's QUO.com/LockedOnNBA. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. And lastly, this episode is brought to you by ZocDoc. Guys, it's 2026, and the days of waiting for something to become a full-blown emergency before you see a doctor are over. No more walking it off for 6 months. No more pretending that weird shoulder stiffness you have is just sleeping wrong or something you felt in the gym. It's time to take your health seriously, and ZocDoc makes that easier than ever, because staying healthy is more than just hitting the gym or eating right. It's about actually getting checked out when things feel off. Using ZocDoc makes scheduling easier. Search for in-network doctors and book right in the app, where real appointment times are listed, including same-day visits. It lets you compare providers using patient reviews and not ads. As someone who's been looking for a new family doctor, I can tell you how helpful it is to get real insight from real people, and it's making it much simpler to keep your health a priority, even with a busy schedule and even before something becomes a much bigger problem. The app is clean, it's quick, and it removes all the stress of finding a doctor. So stop putting off your doctor's appointments and get the care you need. Go to ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNBA to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com, ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNBA, ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, Duane, as we continue this episode of the Raptors Postcast, be sure to check out Sean Woodley with Locked On Raptors in the morning to get more in-depth analysis of this 122-109 win. And we are going to take it to you for our Take Notice segment. Duane, what do you have to tell us today about your observations from this game?
All right, today for our Take Notice segment, we had the secondary stars stepping up. I mean, we already know that they had to elevate their game because it's a back-to-back. And being the ultimate X factors, first of all, we know the usual suspects of Scotty Barnes and also Brandon Ingram are going to do their thing. Shout out to the classic movie Usual Suspects by Bryan Singer, but we know that they're going to do their thing. But who else is going to step up? They had 21 bench points, the Raptors did, which was amazing. You also have Grady Dick, who had 11 points. Again, not the most points in the world, but his activity was outstanding. Him making plays out on the open floor. His athletic finishes at the rim were sweet and definitely energy boosters for the team, creating that great vibe. And then you have Mamu, that dude. I mean, he is that guy. He's been playing at a high level. He's providing a spark. He seems motivated. He's rising to the moment, and he's not hesitating. That's one thing that I noticed from him is that when he has the open look, he's going to take it, and he's going to make the right play 9 times out of 10. So I love the energy that Mamu's playing with. He had 22 points and 9 rebounds, not to mention 4 assists. So again, he's making great decisions out there. And then Shed, I already spoke about it, him being one half of the backcourt bully, but 15 points, 5 rebounds, and 6 assists. I mean, you had help from the secondary guys who don't usually play at a high level, but when they do, it really contributes to the Raptors winning. So I like that they all contributed and they helped out the usual suspects of Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned them, and I'm glad you showed them love, because for a Raptors team that is very depleted right now, again, no RJ Barrett, no Jakob Poeltl, no Jacoby Walter, and now CMB is out for a bit. Now, the reporting is that RJ and Jacoby Walter are close. They hopefully can make it for the end of this road trip, but there's no real imminent sign of when Jakob Poeltl is going to be back. CMB is still being evaluated for a thumb sprain/contusion, so his status is a bit day-to-day at this point as well. So you need some of these guys to step up. And like you said, Sandro Mamukelashvili's shot making is going to be important, but also his activity on the glass. He had, I believe it was like 12 rebounds last game against the Warriors, and then this game he comes out with 9 rebounds, 3 on the offensive end. That's just production on the glass you really need when you're a smaller roster, and Mamu is forced into playing center for you. And you said it yourself, the confidence in being able to take shots. We mentioned that nice skip pass that Brandon Ingram made to Sandro Mamukelashvili where he hit that 3 in the right corner, but if people are watching the game, they saw the possession right before that, they found Mamu above the break and he missed it. But he didn't let that hit his confidence. He didn't let that slow him down. He knew he needs to be out there to make shots and space the floor. So he continued to do his job. You mentioned Jamal Shed. 10 points in the third quarter, which we talked about, but we hadn't had a chance to mention it yet. He left for a couple minutes because he turned his ankle. But the fact that he came back in and he grinded it out and he was able to provide the impact that he did for the Raptors in that third quarter, again, also going 3 of 5 from downtown, that speaks to his growth and his ability to add his energy and impact to this game. And Grady Dick, 5 of 12 isn't, like you said, the cleanest shooting night, but for him to take 12 shots, for him to be that willing to be active. Again, some of it early on was just missing bunnies on really good cuts. He had a really nice reverse cut off the baseline where I thought it was a great move by him. It just didn't go down. But for him to stick to that process, I'll take 5 shots and 12 attempts from him based on the slump that he was in and just the energy it provided a Raptors bench that in the first half was truly getting outplayed by the Kings bench. Malik Monk, I believe, in the first half had 13 points. He was 5 for 5. So for the Raptors to be able to bounce back in that second half, I think a big part of it, yes, was your stars leading the way, but to your point, the secondary guys were doing their job as well. Jonathan Mobile was 0 of 4 to start this game. He made 1 shot, but he really brought it on defensively in that second half, especially late. So to see these guys step up in those situations, I think is a positive indicator for when the Raptors do get healthy.
Yeah, you need these utility guys, these guys that can step up in moments like that, like you said. And I just love it. Next man up mentality. As a player, I want to show some more love and give flowers to Shed, because going out with it seemed like an ankle injury, but then sticking with it just kind of brings you back to the word we used to describe the third quarter, which was resiliency. And that's what they tapped into. And as a player, when you see one of your main guys or one of your guys who are playing hard get hurt, and they're still able to stick it out and come back and return to the game. No, it's not Jordan in the flu game, but it still provides some type of inspiration and muse to you to see your comrade, your brother, step onto the court and play through any type of knick-knack injury that he just received. And I think that also provided a spark for the team overall, showing that Shed was kind of not afraid of anything and just being fearless, because he was still up into the ball. He was still making good plays and still letting that shot fly. And I just love his energy and his poise and his confidence, because after he hit shots, he wasn't celebrating. He was just getting back on defense, acting like it was another day at the office, bringing your hard hat and your lunch pill to work. So shout out to the secondary stars, and hopefully they can continue that a juice off the bench, especially guys like AJ Lawson. I want to show love to him, hometown hero, doing his thing out there, playing in front of his family and his friends for his hometown. You have guys like Battle coming out and making a shot, and that also makes a difference, right? Because you see, you go into a zone and you have a guy come off the bench and lace one right between the eyes. As a opposing team, you're like, all right, maybe we might have to back out this zone if they have guys coming off the bench hitting shots. So shout out to him staying ready and being available. And then you also had guys like Abaji. I can't speak about it enough, but he picks up players 94 feet, and he's so athletic. I mean, he got blocked on one play going to the basket trying to dunk it, but you love the mentality of coming into the game, playing hard defense, and attacking the ball, attacking the basket on a straight line drive to the basket.
Yeah. It's a good night for the secondary guys where Jamison Battle made one shot. Ochai Agbaji made two shots. I remember each of their baskets because they were impactful. They were meaningful. Like you said, Jamison Battle to hit that three when the Raptors were kind of leaking oil a bit against that zone, it made the Sacramento Kings have to think twice about it. Ochai Agbaji, that lob towards the end of the game that you mentioned already, that was a timely basket when the Raptors were reeling a bit. They were able to gain their composure. And for Ochai to have that play to really kind of put the exclamation point on it, I think that's what you need from these guys. You don't need them to be stars of the show. You don't need them to carry the weight. Sometimes when a guy like Jamal Shed, Andrew can do it, that's awesome. But at the end of the day, your stars are there for a reason. They're supposed to lead you, and you're supposed to do stuff to make their lives easier. So if Ochai Agbaji can be a modest play finisher, if, again, Jonathan Mobile, we know why he's out there. It's to be a defensive player first. Anything on offense is gravy. You want to see him do a bit more. He nearly yammed one down, but it went through context. But that's what you want to see from Jonathan Mobile, right? Go up strong. As long as they're doing their jobs and playing in their roles, and the star players are taking care of the rest, that's the recipe you want for a well-built team.
Yeah, it is. And speaking of Jonathan Mobile, I love the fact that, I mean, he got called for a lot of fouls, but his presence in the paint of just trying to be a rim protector and attempting to utilize his length for the verticality when he's challenging these shots, I think is something that has to be credited for, because it's not a guy that's, staying out the paint. It's a guy that's willing to put his body on the line, but also use the good techniques. I know the Raptors work on that a lot, especially when I was playing from 905, using the job of trying to, make sure you're vertical. And that's a new thing that players like to do in the NBA now. But again, he got called for those fouls, but I love the fact that he was active on the baseline and being there, willing to step up and put his body on the line. So got to show love to these guys. Can't say it enough. It's a team game, man. So it's a team sport, and you need these guys, your brothers, to kind of hold you up whenever things are going wrong.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. It's a do-it-by-committee team sometimes, and you need that, especially when you're depleted, and the Raptors were very much able to do that. Now, we are going to move on to hand out our player of the game, but it's late. Right now, we are recording at 1 Eastern, so for everyone that is tuning in live, we really appreciate you. Thank you for the people that said the kind words about us starting our show. We are in the first week, so Grant from Victoria, BC, we appreciate your comment, and everyone else that is tuning in live. But Duane, it is now time for us to hand out our player of the game.
This is the Locked On Player of the Game.
All right, this is going to be a little different than the Warriors game, because that felt a lot easier given the fact that Emmanuel quickly had 40 points, 10 assists. It was like a Raptors record in many ways. I think he's the second guy to have 40 and 10 with 80% field goal shooting whenever you're in Will Chamberlain's company, pretty often. But yeah, so the Raptors tonight is interesting. All 5 starters finished with more than 15 points. Like you said, Mamu led the way early. A guy like Shed and Scotty did their work in the third quarter, and then Brandon Ingram was able to do stuff late. So I'll kind of just throw it to you to see who do you want to go with for player of the game. Some of the numbers: Brandon Ingram finishes with 22 points, 4 assists, 3 rebounds. Scotty, 23. He had 8 rebounds, 7 assists, and 4 steals, by the way. And then Mamu, we said 22, 9, and 4. IQ with 18, 6 and 8, and then Shed with 15, 5 and 6. Like, I'm throwing numbers at you. You know what's going on. If you had to pick a player of the game out of these guys, who do you think stands out?
For me, I gotta go with Scotty B, man. I don't know if that's a typical stereotypical answer, but the way that he was all over the floor, his activity, intercepting the passes, just stuff in the stat sheet, like I spoke about last game, and having his imprint all over this basketball game, I think was something to be noted for. And it's funny because there's some baskets that he attempted in the paint and he was getting fouled and he wasn't getting called for. I remember a play where it felt like DeRozan kind of pulled him from behind the post and he lost the ball, and the Kings went back down, but quickly was able to steal it and intercept the pass. But the fact that Barnes was able to continue to play through the contact, he didn't shy away from it. He still continued to attack the basket. He still continued to look for his teammates. So I think that's something to be said, because as a star player, I know what it's like to get, beat up, hacked, going to the rim. The fouls are not calling or getting called your way, and then you can get discouraged. But he didn't let that discourage him. He was still able to play defense. Like I said, one of the plays where the Kings were attacking the basket, kicked it out, and Scotty intercepted it. Looked like a safety out there, looking like he need to be signed to the NFL. But Scotty just being everywhere, I think, has been like a key reason is why the Raptors are doing well on this road trip.
Yeah, it was a fifth straight game of 20 plus points. I think that's the first time in his career he's done that, or at least it's one of the few times in his career he's been able to stack that many games of high scoring nights. 14 points in the third quarter. He was 5 of 6. Again, pivotal to that third quarter turnaround and changing the tides. And it was just a game where you saw everything you wanted to see from your lead player, especially in terms of leaving his imprint on that second half. That was really important. You mentioned a little bit about his development in terms of not necessarily being too fixated on the foul calls, not letting that pull him down, and being able to fight through that, get to the line when he can, and still be a leader on the floor. I think one of his other developments this season, which I want to get your thoughts on, is that his shot diet has kind of gone back to this nice blend of when he was a younger player, like in his rookie season, where there's a lot more rolling, there's a lot more being able to get to the basket, get to the middle. And then last season specifically, there was much more experimenting with his mid-range turnaround. You wanted it to be a counter, but it was more of a go-to move for him last season. He also tried to experiment with more three-point shooting. But if you look at Scotty Barnes during this hot stretch especially, he's not relying on his jumper nearly as much. It is very much a counter. You did see it tonight to help break that zone at times, but he only took 3 3-point attempts, for example. From a player's perspective, what is the evolution you've seen from Scotty Barnes this season specifically to kind of not have a turnaround, because he was always developing and he's young in his career, but last season felt like a bit of a plateau, and to see him kind of take that step back into all-star and even go further into all NBA level this season? What have you seen from him?
I've seen him just be more conscious. I think that's one of the things you want to do as a player. Like you said, you don't want to rely too much on the three ball. I know he spent a lot of time working on it. So it's like a couple seasons ago, it's like he always wanted to pop. But now, like you said, mixing it up is how you keep the defense honest. You don't want to give the defense a steady diet of doing one thing. So for him to become the ultimate 3-level scorer, because he is that guy that's kind of a jack of all trades, especially on the offensive end. He could be a point forward. He can handle the ball from the top. But it's okay for Quickly or for Shed to bring the ball up and you to establish a deeper post position, or you to establish a deeper catch on the wing or in the point post position, so that you can be closer to the basket. And then that's when I like when he has a little jab jump shot, because it reminds me of the Chris Bosh era. It reminds me of just a closer shot, a mid-range shot that's more effective. It's simple. You saw a couple drives to the basket, straight line, 1 or 2 dribbles, nothing crazy. I don't want to see him sizing guys up through the legs, behind the back, all that stuff. No, get into your bag by being efficient. And I think that's what he's been tapping into recently. And that's a big part of his development, is keeping things simple, and less is more, especially at the highest level. And that's what he's doing. And again, when you start making some shots, when you get to the line, and a star player, you want to be assertive and attack the basket. So you don't want to settle. And as you get to the line and you get a better feel for your shot and it warms up, then you can start popping a little bit more. And that's when you see him start to attempt more 3-pointers. But again, you want to not let the defense off the hook by just settling for jump shots consistently. You want to attack the basket and put pressure on the referee, on the rims, and also just provide a spark for your team by showing that you're dominant and getting into that paint.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. You want to see him play inside out, because he is this physical, dominant presence. Darko Rakovic mentioned it. He doesn't think there's many other players in the league that can play point guard one night, play center the other night, be a wing the third night. And Scotty Barnes is able to do all those things. And it's that variety that is his strength. So not letting yourself settle into being a one-note player, I think very much plays into who Scotty should be in the NBA. It's the type of player he has the talent to be in the NBA. And when he is, the Raptors are able to do stuff like they did tonight. Again, they're 10th 10-point comeback of the season, and very much Scottie Barnes' fingerprints were all over it. All right, Duane, before we wrap up, any final thoughts on the Raptors getting this victory? They're now 2-1 on this 5-game road trip. They've been able to stack a couple wins here after a couple losses, and I believe now they're at least half a game within the Knicks for third in the Eastern Conference. They may even be tied with them at this point for third in the Eastern Conference, which would be pretty cool. But any final thoughts on this Raptors victory?
I think it's just a great job of handling. We call it a business trip. Whenever you're on the road, it's not to have fun. It's not to hang out. It's not to be with family or friends. It's to go and get a job done. And like I said earlier about them bringing the hard hats and their lunch to work, they did a great job of trying to figure out this road trip. And playing on the road is never easy, especially when you're depleted like you talked about. But they did a good job of kind of creating that sense of narrative, like, we'll be all right. We'll be able to hold the fort down until our main guys get back. And I think that's something they could take away going forward, is that, no, we're capable. And it doesn't matter if it's the Kings. It doesn't matter if it's the Warriors. It doesn't matter who is on the other side of the court. As long as we bring our best, we'll be able to line up with anybody. So I think that is something that they could have on their minds going forward in terms of their mindset and how they approach winning these basketball games.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. It's mindset, it's work ethic, it's trusting the process, all things you've mentioned from a player's perspective. And the Raptors, like you said, have shown it. They've been taking care of business at least the last couple of games. All right, I think that's a pretty sweet spot for us to wrap it up. So for myself, Zulfi, Sheikh, and Duane Notice, thank you to everyone who tuned in live and for those that are listening the morning after. If you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe to the Locked On Raptors feed on all platforms. And don't forget to comment below if you had any thoughts. We will be back on Friday live after the Raptors visit the Portland Trailblazers, the 4th of 5 games on this road trip. So we will see you then on the Raptors postcast. Peace.